AARP YouTube channel. So please click on it when it appears on your screen. If you are not familiar, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering Americans 50 plus and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to the more than 100 million Americans 50 years and older and their families, including health, financial, security, and personal fulfillment. Today's program focuses on health and wellness, which is part of our social change agenda. So, who is in the audience today? We had a lot of people registered for this good show. If you haven't already, again, put your first name in the chat and let us know what city you're zooming in from. Joyce, who is with us today?
Wow, Jacqueline, thank you so very much. And our very first person is, is Susan from Temecula. She flew in really fast. Then Aurora came in, Sacramento came in, Seattle, Hyde Park, San Francisco, a lot of San Franciscans, Pasadena, Los Angeles. Oh, we have Tustin at Texas, Palm Springs. Okay, I'm getting excited now. Connecticut, Sacramento, here we go. So we have Pleasantville, California. I can keep going on and on and on and on, but I'm going to give it right back to you. And I'm going to leave it with Florida, was still coming in.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for your sharing in the chat. We are delighted to have all of you join us today, and we're excited to share with you growing dwarf fruit trees in containers. To get us warmed up today, we have a poll question, and we ask you to quickly submit your answers. What types of dwarf fruit trees are you interested in growing? Lemon trees, lime trees, orange trees, apple trees, pear trees, or some other type of fruit tree? Let us know. Boy, people jumped on that quick. That was wonderful. Oh, 69% say lemon tree, 40% lime trees, 45% orange trees, 19% apple trees, some say 19% pear trees, and some people say 12%. The bottom line is everybody is interested in growing these fruit trees today. We are going to learn a lot about that, and thank you for answering in the poll. Backed by popular demand, and I mean popular demand, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Master Gardener Sarah June.
Hello, everybody.
Morning.
Hi, Jacqueline. How you doing?
I'm good. Sarah June is a UC Master Gardener in Southern California. She grew up enjoying the abundance of her grandmother's garden and has been working on growing her own organic food ever since. After learning about how compost can rebuild eroded topsoil and capture carbon from the atmosphere. She decided to enter the UC Master Gardener program to learn more and share her knowledge with her community. She loves growing herbs, tomatoes, fruit, and California native plants. As a reminder, please put any questions for Sarah June in the chat during the program, and she will answer them during the Q&A portion of our program. And per our tradition, to add some spice to their introduction, fun facts about herbs and Sarah June. Sarah June's favorite type of basil and Persian basil, which has green and purple leaves and a slightly citrusy taste. Her favorite way to consume it is as a strong tea sweetened with honey. Sarah June, welcome back. We know you have a lot of great information for us today. We're ready when you are.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I am very excited about this presentation. Hopefully it will be the first of a few, because as I'll talk about, growing citrus trees is a bit different from growing other types of fruit trees in or out of containers. So maybe we'll have some follow-up workshops in the same vein, because it looks like a lot of you guys are trying to grow other types of fruit trees as well, figs, apples, pears, etc. So today we are just going to be focusing on citrus, and just keep in mind that I'll mention when the information is applicable to other types of fruit trees as well, and a lot of it will be, but you'll see that citrus trees have some specific needs. So I am going to share my screen real quick. Give me just one sec. Okay. And da, 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 da. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to get it. Okay, so this will be, but how do I make it? There we go. No. Sorry, give me a second.
All right, it might be under view on the top left. Slideshow.
Okay. Okay, great. Yes, this is this works. It's covering my screen, but that's fine for me. Okay, great. Everybody can see slideshow. Give me a thumbs up. Great. I wish I could see the chat at the same time as I'm giving the slideshow, but I'll come to the chat at the end of the presentation. Okay, so fruit trees at home, citrus. First, some fun facts about citrus. Citrus, I'll be talking about citrus as opposed to oranges, lemons, limes, etc. throughout this presentation, because as you'll see, citrus is actually a genus, and it encompasses all citrus fruits: oranges, lemons, limes, grapefruits, pomelos, kumquats, whatever you got that's in the citrus genus is going to be covered in this presentation. Over on the right, you can see a little bit of a crazy family tree. All citrus, Citrus reticulata is the mandarin, Citrus limon is lemon, Citrus aurantium is sour orange, used a lot in Persian cooking. But all citrus originated from a small number of citrus species in Asia and Australia, mostly Southern and Eastern Asia. Now, citrus trees are extremely popular worldwide. Citrus trees actually produce more fruit worldwide than all deciduous fruit trees. They are very popular. And when grown from seed, it'll take a citrus tree about 10 to 15 years to begin producing fruit. I, like most of you, am most interested in growing lemons. So before we move forward, I want to talk about something that I talk about in every presentation that I give, which is finding your zone. Finding your USDA growing zone is going to help you grow trees and whatever else. You can find it out very easily by going to this URL that I have up here. It's on the USDA's website, and you can figure out what growing zone you live in. And when you're looking for plants that you want to put in your garden or in your home, you can use this growing zone to figure out, is my climate appropriate for this plant? Is this plant going to need to be protected from heat or cold at different times? Is this plant going to be able to produce fruit, or is it going to be too cold for it to ever produce fruit, etc.? So find your zone. We're not going to talk about it specifically later in the presentation, so you don't need to do it right this second, but I highly recommend knowing your growing zone. The higher your zone number, the longer your warm season. So I am in zone 10B, which is one of the hottest growing zones in the United States. It looks like a lot of you are in California, so you will likely be in zone 10, 9, or 8. So some definitions. I'm going to be talking a little bit about cultivars. A cultivar is a plant variety that has been produced in cultivation through selective breeding. Cultivars are chosen for their, mainly for the attributes of their flowers and fruit. A fruit that tastes good, is not too acidic, and produces at a high rate. So in this little example, you'll see I've written Citrus limon ex Mayeri. So when you're looking at a plant's label, this is how you can understand what the name of the plant is by its Latin name. Citrus, which is bolded here, is the genus. Like I said, all citrus comes from the same genus. So it's always going to be citrus something, or sometimes you'll see it C dot something. So citrus is the genus, limon here is the species, which is lemon, and then it'll say X, and then the third word here, which is underlined, is Mayeri. That's the name of the cultivar. This is a Meyer lemon. This is the Latin name for a Meyer lemon, Citrus limon X Mayeri. So that's how you can read those names if you're ever curious, what is it that I'm looking at here? In this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about semi-dwarf and dwarf trees, since we're focusing on trees in containers. So a standard size citrus tree like orange or grapefruit is about 20 to 30 feet tall, fully grown and mature. A semi-dwarf tree is a citrus tree that will produce fruit the same size as the standard tree, but it will not grow to more than 20 feet high. Or what you could call 2/3 of the standard height, the standard size tree's height. So for a citrus tree, that would be around like it would max out at 15 to 20 feet tall for a semi-dwarf. And then for a dwarf, the absolute biggest that a dwarf tree is going to get is 10 to 15 feet high. You can control the size of the tree very easily by pruning and cutting. But this is just like the absolute maximum that they can get. So you can choose semi-dwarf, and obviously if you're growing in a container, you're going to want to choose a dwarf species so that you get the healthiest tree at a small size. And again, the fruit is the same size for all of them. A dwarf tree does not mean tiny fruit. Common misconception. Okay, oops. All right. Some facts about citrus growth. Citrus trees are not annuals like a lot of the deciduous fruit trees that you guys are familiar with, like apples, pears, cherries, etc. They're perennials. They're evergreen. They do not drop all of their leaves in the fall or winter. They actually drop leaves throughout the year, but they never drop all of their leaves at once. It's just a few at a time all throughout the year for different reasons. So they're on a different kind of growth cycle than deciduous fruit trees. So this is one big reason that citrus tree care is different from deciduous fruit tree care, is that they go semi-dormant when it gets colder, but they do not go fully dormant, and they will still be growing and produce. Their growth rate is just different. For a lot of cultivars of citrus trees, you can get fruit year-round. You can get multiple fruit cycles. Personally, I have a Meyer lemon tree that produces 2 fruit cycles a year, one in the winter and one in like late spring. Citrus trees' leaves, they make food through photosynthesis like all leaves do. They also store food, which is not something that every fruit tree's leaves do. Citrus flowers are well known for their absolutely heavenly smell. Citrus flowers, and this will be important later for fruit productivity. Citrus flower buds form on new leafy growth on the tree that comes from an older leafy stem. Citrus buds can grow in a lot of different ways, again, depending on cultivar and tree site. They can be one bud right at the end of the shoot. They can be multiple flowers all over the shoot with no leaves, or they can be multiple flowers all over the shoot with leaves. For the most part, citrus flowers are what is called scientifically perfect, meaning they contain both male and female structures, so they can pollinate themselves, and they will produce fruit even if there is no other citrus tree around for miles, or if they are indoors. However, if they are indoors and they have no outdoor access, like you're not moving a container in and out, you may need to hand pollinate in order to ensure fruit production. But they will not need a second tree to make fruit. And if you have 2 citrus trees in the same yard, they're not that likely to cross-pollinate on their own. They will self-pollinate themselves. Good question. What type of citrus should I grow? For a lot of people, this is a question determined only by taste. What is it that I want to eat? And that's a great question. You should definitely ask that question, because especially if you live in California and you're planting a citrus tree, you are going to get more citrus than you bargained for. I recommend using the UC Riverside Citrus Variety Collection website, which I've put up here. The UC Riverside Citrus Collection and Breeding Institute has an enormous amount of information about commercially available varieties of citrus tree in the US. So that's a really fun website to go explore if you want to learn about all the different kinds of lemons and oranges there are. On that site, you'll also be able to see what citrus type would grow best in your climate, in your space, and for your taste preferences. You can choose fruit based on, if you're like, I don't like to eat oranges, but I love orange juice, you're going to want to select a cultivar that is better for juicing, meaning that its skin is not going to be as thick and easy to peel, but it's going to be juicier. Maybe the fruit is even going to be bigger. Acidity is also a really big issue, especially for some people's dietary needs. You may not be able to eat a lot of high acid, and so you're going to want to choose a fruit that has less acidity and is sweeter. More on that later. So this is a great way to figure out what type of citrus you should grow. Heat requirements. This is one thing that almost everybody knows about citrus, is that you cannot grow it in a place where it freezes. You cannot grow it outside in a place where it freezes. But it is really important to know that you can keeping a tree alive and having a tree fruit are very different things. A tree can stay alive in, in a cool climate, but it will not have enough sun and heat to produce fruit. It'll be ornamental. It will not be a food tree. Citrus trees grow best between 70 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. They can do a little cooler. They can do a little hotter. Again, depending on the cultivar. So if you live in a place where you get the occasional freeze, maybe you live in Northern California, and perhaps climate change is changing the weather patterns in ways that you did not expect. In that case, you may want to choose a citrus cultivar that is a little bit cold resistant, meaning that if you get some unexpected cold temperatures, the tree is not going to suffer too much damage. We'll also talk a little bit about protecting your tree later on in the presentation. One important thing to know about your heat is that higher acidity fruits require less heat. So if you are trying to grow a lemon, you don't need to be growing it in a place that hot. However, if you want to grow something like a sweet pink grapefruit, you are going to need Florida type temperatures. Okay, and this is kind of the last basics of cultivated fruit trees, but it is really important to know these terms so that you understand what I'm talking about later. Cultivated fruit trees that are available in the US for home gardeners to purchase are usually two trees stuck together. The rootstock will be one type of tree. The rootstock is selected for, obviously, the health of its roots, its resistance to root diseases, and how it affects the cultivar that is grafted onto it. The rootstock will be the roots and the lower 6 inches to 1.5 feet of the trunk. When you go to the store, or if you look on a mail order website to buy your citrus, you will see a little place on the trunk close to the bottom, but it shouldn't be too close to the soil line, but it'll be close to the bottom, ideally about 6 to 12 inches, where you'll see kind of a knob. That is where the scion has been grafted onto the rootstock. A scion is a different citrus cultivar that is selected for fruit taste, quantity, cold hardiness, disease resistance. So both the rootstock and the scion are selected for different reasons, and then they are combined. And the reason that we do this is because, as I mentioned earlier, if you plant a citrus tree from seed, it will take 10 to 15 years to start fruiting, and the fruit will not be what is called true to type. It may not taste and look exactly like the fruit that you got the seed from, because sexual reproduction does not create an exact clone. Grafting, scion wood, does create an exact clone. So you know with absolute certainty that when you cut a scion branch off a Meyer lemon tree and you graft it onto a different rootstock, that is going to produce Meyer lemons exactly like the tree that you got it from. So the scion rootstock graft is done because it allows the new tree to begin fruiting, I would say, even 2 to 4 years after it is planted out in your yard or your container or whatever. It's skipping the seedling phase that happens when you grow a tree from seed, and so you do not need to wait a decade before you see whether or not you want that tree's fruit. So this is the way that basically all fruit trees that are available to you for purchase are made: scion and rootstock. Very important to remember so that you can understand the kind of tree you're buying. Where should you buy your tree? This is a question I get a lot. You want to buy trees from a local nursery when possible. If that is not possible, you can also buy trees from mail order. It is a lot more affordable to buy a bare root tree than a potted tree. What will happen is you'll get a package that looks like it just has a little stick in it, a stick with some roots. It looks dead, but it's not. You plant it in the ground and it will come to life. Have a little faith. If you're at the store and you are looking among a bunch of orange trees, how do you pick the best one? The answer is, for the most part, they're all the same. Don't worry about it too much. But what you want to do is check to see that the plant that you're taking home, one of the biggest things to check for, especially with citrus trees here in the US, is to see if it has pest damage. There are some pretty serious citrus diseases, and they can attract a lot of pests. So you want to make sure that there's no pest damage on the tree right when you buy it already. You want to check that the leaves have like a solid green color, that they're pretty uniform. You don't want yellowing leaves. You don't want blemishes on the trunk. And also, if you see a plant that has roots kind of coming out of the bottom of the container, that's not good. That plant is root bound. It's not going to take as well when you put it in the ground. A little bit more about roots, because this again applies to any container plant that you buy, or rather any plant that you buy in a container. Or actually any bare root plant, now that I think about it. A healthy root is white or light colored, should not be slimy, should not be smelly, and should be a pretty regular shape, meaning a wide branching out shape. That's what's meant by the regular shape. If you look at this picture on the left, you'll see that they look like our veins. That's the shape you're looking for. An unhealthy root will have kind of weird shapes. They'll be more clumped together, maybe narrower. The roots may be slimy or smelly, and they may be dark colored. If you see any of these things on the roots of a plant that you're looking at the store, don't buy it. It's not going to do well, and it's not your fault. So that's a pretty good barometer for when you're choosing a plant at the store. Healthy roots should not be growing around the tree in its own container. That's root bound. That's what's called root bound. And when you plant that tree in the ground, it's going to take a really long time to get established, if it does at all. Healthier roots look like the picture on the left, or rather the tree on the left, not the tree on the right. If you are at the store, you can ask to lift the tree out of its container for a sec, so you can check the roots. You can also lift it up, excuse me, and look at the bottom of the container. Growing in containers. Again, this applies to all plants, not just your citrus trees. You want to consider your heat and water needs for these. Consider your need for water retention so that you don't have to spend more water than you can afford watering this tree. So depending on where you are, and again, you know, citrus trees love heat. So unglazed clay, glazed clay, wood, metal, plastic is fine. It is not the most, it doesn't last the longest, I will say that. When you buy your tree and you want to put it in your soil, any fruit tree that you want to produce a lot of fruit that you're going to eat is going to need to be fed pretty consistently. Organic amendments are the most complete for your little tree. The soil pH that citrus trees like best is between 6 and 7.5. It's pretty standard, but if you are having issues, you can always test your soil pH and make sure that that soil is not too acidic or too alkaline for your tree. Citrus trees like loamy soil. Basically, sandy loam is okay, clay loam is okay, but overall, it's not going to do well in a soil that is very sandy where the water drains quickly. It's not going to do well in soil that's very clay where water absorbs really, really slowly, and when it dries, it gets extremely hard. This is, you know, applicable to basically every other deciduous fruit tree, but providing sunlight, very important for your citrus tree. You have to find your plant's, your home's sun orientation to figure out, if I want to put my tree here, there, or everywhere else, how many hours of sun will it get per day? Citrus trees need a lot of sun. They need a lot of sun, especially to ripen their fruit. Citrus trees can produce a green fruit, and I'm not talking limes, I'm talking like an orange. You know, when an orange tree makes its little oranges, they start out green. And then over time, as they ripen, they turn orange. Well, an orange can still be ripe even if its skin is green. This is one amazing thing about citrus trees. The skin actually turns its, finished color according to how much sun it receives on the fruit itself. So if you have a citrus tree and it has fruit, and you might see an orange, but there's a lot of leaves surrounding it so that it's quite shaded, you might see that that orange will stay on the tree and it will just never turn orange. It'll stay green, or maybe like part of it will turn orange, but the top part is green. That's because sun is only hitting on that place where it turns orange. So you can prune off leaves if you want to let the orange skin turn completely orange, but you don't have to do that. You can actually pick it when it looks half ripe, and it may be ripe. It depends more on what time it is of the year and how long it's been on the tree rather than the color of the skin itself. Putting a tree in southern exposure is the best way to guarantee that it will get the most consistent sun. So if you have that option, highly recommend that for your trees. If you're growing indoors, which is something we're talking about a lot in this presentation, actually, sorry, I'll skip ahead. If you're growing indoors, I really, really, really recommend the use of grow lights. They are not just for marijuana. They work on every plant. Grow lights are great for providing supplemental light to indoor plants, and they can help direct growth. For most people, you're putting your container plant in front of a window so that it can get direct light through that window. And what you'll notice is that the plant starts to grow towards the window. So you can turn the plant a quarter turn every week or so to make sure that it is growing straight. But another thing you can do that also helps a lot if you live in a place that doesn't have that much sun or warmth is get a small grow light. It does not have to be a huge overhead panel. It can just be a little clippy one that like plugs in. You can get ones that are battery powered, and they can provide supplemental light so that the light that the tree or container plant is receiving is more balanced. Obviously, the sunlight through the window is probably going to be stronger than your grow light, but it will help balance it out. You may still turn your container plant, but overall, it'll just help the plant a lot. Watering and fertilizing any container plant is super important. I highly recommend subsurface irrigation. And what this means in practice for a citrus tree in a container is that you're going to need a pretty big pot. A lot of people want to grow citrus trees in containers so that they can move them, so that they can like put it out on a patio or porch during the spring and summer. And then in the fall or winter, when it gets too cold, you can bring it inside. That's very doable. I really, really recommend, if you're going to do that, to get some kind of a rolling platform to put the container on, because the container will probably be too big and heavy for you yourself to easily move. If you want a tree of a good size, it should be too big and heavy for you to easily move. Another really important thing about having a large container is that it allows you space to do subsurface irrigation, which is a much more water efficient way of watering your plants. It is also easier on the soil. It prevents the soil from being compacted. When you're watering a plant that's in a pot, you're always watering from the surface. Over time, that pressure of the water is going to compact your soil bit by bit by bit. That's fine. You can always repot, you can always change out the soil that's in your container, but it really helps if you can just have something like this buried clay pot that you see in my picture, so that you can just put the water straight in the pot. This is an unglazed clay pot where water leaches out the sides. It goes directly to the plant's roots. There is way less water lost through surface evaporation. Here's a little bit more about self-watering methods. A wick is also a really good one. A wick and reservoir. If you have a container of this type that has a little reservoir at the bottom, that's also a great way to water your container plants. Bottom watering also prevents what's called hydrophobia. Like I said, when you water from the top, the soil will compact. And over time, that compacted soil will no longer be able to expand enough to absorb water. So if you've ever watered a container plant and just seen all the water come out of the bottom, what's happening is the soil is hydrophobic or afraid of water. Bottom watering really helps prevent that, again, because you're not coming from the top, you're going from the bottom. It allows the soil to soak up the water down where the roots are. which is where the plant needs water. It doesn't need water at its stem. It needs water at its roots. And so that's one of the challenges of container planting. And so I really, really recommend watering in non-surface ways if you can. It'll prevent you a lot of problems later on. How am I doing on time?
Sarah June, you have another 10 to 15 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, gonna go back. Okay, so one other thing about citrus trees, as you probably know, they do not like frost. If it freezes where they are, it may kill them. It will definitely damage them. Ways to protect your tree. Oh, I did not finish writing my last bullet point here, but it's the most important one. How to protect your tree. The main way, I'm going to talk about physical coverings in a second, but the most important thing is your tree's overall health. If your tree is well irrigated, well fertilized, inspected for pests, it will be able to take frost damage and recover from frost damage. Again, depending on, what temperatures you're talking about, but it may be able to do that without a physical covering. The overall health of your tree is what is going to keep your tree weathering these type of events and still producing fruit for you. Now, if you live in a place where it frosts and you have a citrus tree that you want to have outside, whether it's in a container or not, there are a couple of ways to keep the tree warm enough that it doesn't sustain damage. You can wrap stuff around the trunk. There's like wraps you can do because down by the ground is where it's coldest. And so sometimes the tree doesn't need to be protected from frost damage on its leaves, but only down on its trunk. So for that scenario, you can wrap the trunk with a thermal wrap. There are also these sawdust collars that you can put around the trunk. It allows air to move, but it keeps the tree's trunk warm. If you need to protect the foliage, you may have seen people do things like put garbage bags or plastic coverings on their trees. That is an okay thing to do for a very short period of time. If you're like, we're going to have a freeze one night and I don't have anything else, that's okay. But if you live in a cold place and you want to keep your tree outside and you are going to have cold temperatures for longer than one night, the best thing to do is to get a canopy over your tree rather than covering it with plastic, which doesn't let it breathe, and over time is going to be bad for it and lead to increased pest problems. So what you want to do is put a canopy over your tree, like wearing a hat rather than wearing a ski mask. Planting your tree out into its yard site or container in the spring or fall is also a good way to make sure that your tree gets established and can get strong and stay healthy before it has to deal with any temperature related challenges, too much heat or too much cold. Okay, we talked about grow lights, we talked about watering. One thing that you can do, now this is a bit different with citrus trees, but one thing you can do with basically all plants is to prune for more growth. What you're doing is that you are pinching off some flowers in order to spur the plant to create more flowers. When you have a flower, for example, if you have a citrus tree that has what's called a terminal bud, meaning you've got a shoot, maybe it's got some leaves on it, and then it's only got one flower on the end. If you pinch off that flower, meaning you remove it at this point where you see here this little cartoon of the hand, you're not pulling off the entire shoot, you're just pinching off the top. What that does is it spurs the plant's tissues at that specific point to create two flowers where there once were one. And if you can pinch off those two flowers in time, you can create where there once was one flower, now you have 4 flowers, or even 8. So this is something that you can try with any budding plant. It does not work the same on every type of plant, but when I talk about pinching and pruning for blossoms, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. fertilizer. Again, this is applicable to all plants, container or otherwise. But you would be stunned how many times I have received a question about a plant and I've asked, have you ever fed it? And the answer is no. If you have never fed your plant is starving. Plants do not get everything they need from sunlight and water. They need solid food. I very much recommend using organic fertilizers because non-organic fertilizers are derived from petroleum. They're extremely hard on the environment to create and store. They're a very carbon intensive process. It requires a lot of industrial ammonia. So if you can use organic fertilizers, they will provide a more complete nutritional profile for your plants, as well as being better for the soil in the long run. So you can look for fish emulsions, bone or blood meal, guano-based fertilizers, vermicompost, which is worm fertilizer. You can also make fertilizers. I'm not going to get into this too much right now, but I'm happy to answer questions about it. And I will share my email at the end as well if you guys would like to ask any questions. If you live in the state of California, I'll say. This is worm compost. This is a way that you can create your own compost at home from your food scraps. If you keep worm compost well, you can keep it indoors. You can do worm composting in an apartment. It is odorless, and the organic compost that it creates is also odorless. And it should be bug-free if you're maintaining it correctly. Okay, so this is the last slide of my presentation. I would like to get into questions earlier rather than later, because I know that a lot of the questions are going to be pretty specific. So I'll just say to wrap up the slides, I'm a UC Master Gardener. It is a University of California program. We're UC certified volunteers who educate and inform the public about gardening. And if you're interested in the Master Gardener course, you can go to this website right here. If you live in the state of California, you have access to a Master Gardener in your county at all times. We literally have a hotline where you can call and ask questions about plants. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that, especially if I cannot answer questions about your particular climate. There is a Master Gardener in your county in California who will be able to help you out a whole lot. Okay, that's the basics for citrus trees. It is, you know, like I said, it's similar to other fruit trees, but different. And there's a lot that I could not get into because it is very complicated. That has to do with like the biology of citrus trees and their growth cycles. But if you keep your plant healthy, choose the correct cultivar for your space and climate, then you will almost certainly end up with a very, very productive tree. Again, if you live in California, check to make sure there's not already a citrus tree near you that is producing more fruit than its owners can handle. That is a very common situation. All right, let's open it up for questions.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. And we have had a wonderfully interactive audience today. So we've got a gazillion questions for you today.
Great.
One is, okay. One is, if a citrus starts a shoot from the graft point or lower, do I cut that off? Or what
Yes.
about a stalk that is growing for what might be a root?
Okay, I'm gonna scroll up so I can see the question as well. If you have, so one thing you'll notice with any citrus tree is that it will grow shoots all over its trunk. These are for the most part called water sprouts. You can and should remove them. If there is one growing from below the graft line, that means that that is going to produce a leafy and, you know, potentially flowering shoot from that rootstock's cultivar, which is probably not what you are looking for because it's not what was on the label of the tree that you bought. What you bought was labeled by the scion wood. So yes, if you get a sprout from the rootstock, cut it off. Also, if you get sprouts along the trunk, which you will definitely, just pull them off. The earlier you do it, the easier it is. They're very soft when they're first growing, and so you don't even need to be snipping with pruners or anything. You just go through and take them off, twist them off if you're having a hard time. If you leave them on, It will attract pests to around the trunk because those soft new leaves are very nice for many insects to eat and to lay their eggs on. And it will also, the plant will be giving energy to those water sprouts, and so it won't be giving as much energy to the flowering branches at the top, which are the ones that are going to produce the fruit that you want to eat. So you want to remove those sprouts so that the plant can direct its energy towards a lower number of branches, but those branches are the ones that have flowers and fruit on them. Okay, next question.
Is it harmful to the tree, like a lemon tree, to leave old fruit unpicked?
It is not harmful to the tree, but it may affect your yield. It's fine for the tree. Eventually the fruit will fall off. But if you are trying to get more fruit, then yes, you would want to pick the fruit as soon as possible when it's ripe. Because that will basically free up that branch so that it can grow more new shoots, which will have flowers.
What are some examples of some good organic amendments?
So some of that I mentioned in the presentation are blood meal and bone meal, guano, which is bird waste, diluted urea, which is urine, and then vermicompost, which is worm poop, and that can be created through the use of a worm bin. Basically, you have a box that you have a bunch of worms living in, and you put in food scraps. They eat them, and then at the bottom, or depending on the type of worm bin you have, you might have to separate it out, and you end up with a substance that kind of, it looks like very dark, fluffy soil, but it's actually worm poop, which is called vermicompost.
We have a question. When I brought my potted mandarin inside in the winter, it dropped all of its fruit. Why was that?
When you brought it inside in the winter, can I would need to ask a follow-up question to determine. I would say that one reason may have been just the shock. You may have brought it inside a bit late in the winter when, like, if you brought it from kind of a, cold but not freezing outdoor environment to a warm, dry indoor environment. That may have been it. Another big reason is that it may have suffered from the loss of sunlight. So it's not just about the temperature, but for fruit production, remember that the amount of sunlight and consistent sunlight is extremely important. So bringing it in and interrupting, or rather, drastically changing the amount of sunlight that it received, I would say is the most likely explanation. But I would ask a couple follow-up questions about that to give a more specific answer.
So what about pests, white flies, and other bugs to keep my tree safe?
That's another one where I could do a whole nother presentation just on citrus pests, especially because there is currently a very damaging citrus pest called Huanglongbing disease, or you may have also heard it as citrus greening. And that is a pest that originated in Asia that now, because of the importing of fruit tree scions, which is something that happens for all types of fruit, not just citrus, but that is a pest that we are currently dealing with in the United States. That is extremely damaging because it flourishes in our climate. So pests in general, you have the options of using pesticides. And when I say pesticides, that includes chemical pesticides and organically derived pesticides. For me personally, I tend to just use soap spray. That's basically like a drop of dish soap in a bottle of water. It makes a slightly soapy spray. And what that does is soap will destroy the exoskeletons of soft-bodied insects, such as aphids. Ants don't like it. You can include things like mint and cinnamon oils in the spray if you want. That can also help deter pests. But for something like whiteflies, you could also use a neem oil spray. There's also, no, you don't need copper for that. Yeah, I think a neem oil spray works pretty well for whiteflies. I highly recommend the soap spray. And the main thing, if you're dealing with pests, is that you will just need to treat the tree consistently. There is no thing that you're going to spray on the tree once a year that's going to keep pests off of it the whole year. So if you are noticing pests on your tree, find whatever pest treatment works for you. I start with physical removal. A paper towel soaked in rubbing alcohol goes a really long way to remove pests and pest egg sacs that might be stuck to your tree. And then from physical removal, go to prevention, soapy spray or a neem spray. And then if you still have issues, I would say that it may not be the right citrus cultivar for your particular environment. If you have a tree that is beset by pests constantly to the point where like you can't handle it, get a different tree.
Okay. We have just time for a couple more questions. How do you prevent a leaf curl on a nectarine tree?
I'm going to skip that question because it doesn't have to do with citrus and it's a whole different thing. But hopefully we will be able to do another presentation where we talk about stone fruits like nectarines, peaches, plums.
Okay. How often do we need to fertilize our lemon, lime, and orange trees? How much do we put on each time?
The amount of fertilizer that you put on depends on the space. So if you're growing in a container, you need a lot less fertilizer. If you're growing outside, it also depends on the size of the tree. If you have a small sapling, yeah, this thing is, there's a lot of variety factors here. How big is your tree? Where is your tree? How old is it? What size container it is in, or is it in the ground? And what type of, most importantly, what type of fertilizer are you using? If you are using an organic fertilizer, like a big sack of like compost, you can use 10, 15 gallons of it. What you'd want to do is side dress the tree, meaning you're applying the compost kind of in a ring about 1 or 2 feet from the base of the tree. What you're aiming for is the tree's drip line. When it rains, where does the most water drip off the edge of the tree? You'll see that the foliage will kind of create a circle around the tree of where the most rainfall drips onto. That's called the drip line, and that's where a plant, any tree really, will absorb the most nutrients. So you want to go for the drip line. You don't want to put your compost or fertilizer right around the trunk of the tree. That's going to kind of suffocate it a little bit. And then, yeah, how much is really determined by what type of fertilizer you're using. If you are using a chemical fertilizer, please, 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 please read the instructions very, very carefully and dilute to the amounts that are indicated on that product.
Okay. And before I ask one last question, was there anything, Sarah June, in the chat that you wanted to address directly?
I see a dwarf Meyer lemon and lime tree that has been grafted together, but they don't ship to California. Where could I get one of these? They do not ship to California because of that Wanglung disease that I was talking about. There are a lot of restrictions on citrus trees right now because of trying to control citrus greening disease. I don't know where you can get one, but if we do another presentation where we talk about grafting, I can teach you how to make one. I would say that if you are trying to find, this is sometimes called like a fruit cocktail tree, is when you have different cultivars of fruit grafted onto the same tree, like a lemon and a lime or an orange and a grapefruit or whatever. I think you would have better luck trying to make one yourself, or perhaps even hire somebody that lives in your city to graft one for you if you don't want to get into grafting. But there are a lot of people in Southern California, at least, that are into it. Are clementines and mandarins the same? No. How to find the best to grow in my zone? Check the UC Riverside citrus map. Will we be getting handouts? No. I can't grow citrus in zone 6, right? You maybe could if you got a really cold hardy one and you had it in a container that you could move inside. Some citrus, especially again the higher acidity citrus like limes, they will be more cold hardy. And so I would say in zone 6, don't be trying to grow grapefruit, but maybe you could grow limes. Will we receive presentation handouts? No, but this presentation is being recorded and will be on YouTube, so you can go back to it later. Can dwarf trees be successfully grafted onto another? Yes, they can. However, yes, can dwarf trees, I'm assuming you mean, can a dwarf tree be grafted onto a non-dwarf tree? Yes.
I think we've
And
got time for maybe one
great.
more, and then we're going to have to call it a day.
Sure. And then yes, the last one is okay, I think that's all we're gonna have to get into for now. But I would love to do more presentations to talk a little bit more about some of the topics that I sort of skimmed over in the presentation, like worm composting, organic fertilizers, pruning, and grafting. It's a lot, so hopefully I'll be back.
Yeah, it's been an amazing presentation.
Thank you so
you
much.
so much. I have fruit trees, and I've had for years, and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much, Sarah June, for your presentation today. And thanks everyone who shared in the chat. We really had a good interactive audience today. Thank you so much. So before we close out, we'd like to